Oh, yes. Um, I know that in family law, right? The civil union, yes. It's a marriage-like relationship, often between members of the same sex recognized by civil authorities within a jurisdiction. Yes. Vermont was the first state to recognize civil unions in December of 1999. The Vermont Supreme Court ruled that denying gay couples the benefits of marriage amounted to unconstitutional discrimination. Baker versus State, yeah. Several months later, the legislature passed a civil unions law. Now, these domestic partnerships, civil partnerships, yeah. There's always a big question about exactly what kind of marriage we have. They're a little different in civil law. The domestic partnership, yes. It's kind of one of these where two people decide to live together regardless of their sexuality, yes. And then after a certain number of years, they're considered married. There's no asking somebody to marry you. It's one of these where you don't get engaged, you just live together for X number of years, and then the law says, well, you're married. But we didn't have that kind of marriage. I actually got down on one knee and proposed and bought her a wedding ring and all of that. Now, domestic partnerships, domestic partnerships. Domestic dispute, usually resident of family involving violence, often resulting in a call to law enforcement agency. Yeah. Domestic jurisdiction is state's jurisdiction over matters that are internal to that state and governed only by the particular state laws. Yes. Domestic partnership, a non-marital relationship between two persons of the same or opposite sex who live together as a couple for a significant period of time. Yeah. A relationship that employer or government entity recognizes as equivalent to marriage for the purpose of extending employee partner benefits otherwise preserved for the spouses of employees. Yeah. Same-sex marriage. Yeah. And then there's the domestic partnership law. And finally, there's domestic relations. Traditionally the family law together with employment law, family law, domestic relations are the relations existing between the members of a family or household, according to the usual classification. These relations are four in number, namely the relations of husband and wife, yeah. Parent and child, guardian and ward, yeah. Master and servant. The relation of master and servant as a purely domestic relation, yeah, is now of small importance. I mean, it's not every person that happens to be the slave to Washington State. Other branches of law, especially the law of contracts, agency, and torts, a treatise on the law of domestic relations. Oh, oh, oh. Now, when you have a marriage that is more traditional than the domestic relations, yes. This jurisdiction that you don't seem to acknowledge, it is relevant when you have five children that have my last name. Yes. Now, in domestic relations law, it's possible that we could have lived together for approximately 7 to 10 years. They could have had her last name. It might have been Griggs. Yes. Her maiden name. Yeah. But it was me that initiated the marriage, and it was myself that took us to Kosovo, and it was myself that arranged for the marriage so that we would have a marriage license from the United Nations. Yeah. And then she changed her name from Hodges, though she might have changed it Hodges to Griggs to Budnick. Yes. But when you use my last name and then the actual person that says they're the petitioner, right, doesn't take the time to appear in court or does appear in court and says, well, I don't acknowledge the fact. There's some significant lawsuits for not looking at the domestic relations between a husband and wife. Yeah. Then there's the parent and child. Any mother that didn't want to take the time to sign a document because they don't acknowledge the existence of their own. Now, I don't see the signature of the person that I propose to. Yes. And I don't see that same signature of the individual that says, well, I acknowledge receipt of this order and everything that it says, inclusive of that we were intimate partners. Yes. I don't see that signature there. I do see some forgeries. Yes. And I do see a lot of fraud. Oh, now, as the individual known as the respondent, yes, I'm the one that proposed marriage. It's one of these more traditional domestic relations between a husband that proposes to a wife that, well, flies to Kosovo, yes, gets married in a United Nations marriage ceremony, yes, flies back to Clallam County, works at a bank, and supports his family. Now, we are not a common law marriage. Is that what it called? Well, let's look at the difference. Conjugal rights? Yeah, I haven't gotten fucked in a long time. Common law marriage? Common law husband? Yes. Common law fraud? Common law jurisdiction? Oh, common law marriage. See, marriage. Oh, this must be a different kind of marriage where one person doesn't propose to the other? Yes. Where they just decide, well, we've lived together long enough, so we're married, and it's not about being equal. Some people like this traditional marriage. I mean, if I went through every marriage certificate in the United States, how many of them have common law marriage certificates, and how many of them have marriage certificates where they actually had somebody officiate it, and then they had the domestic government acknowledge it? Why don't you get me all the marriage licenses that have been sold in Clallam County? You get some fee for that? You making some money off of the marriage license being issued? Well, common law marriage that takes a legal effect without license or ceremony. Yes. When two people capable of marrying live together as husband and wife, intend to be married, and hold themselves out to others as married couple. Mm. Now, 1753 today, a common law marriage, which is a full equivalent of a ceremonial marriage, is authorized in 11 states and in the District of Columbia. If a common law marriage is established in a state that recognizes such marriages, other states, even those that do not authorize common law marriage, must give full faith and credit to the marriage. Common law marriage can be dissolved only by annulment, divorce, or death. Oh, consensual marriage, the informal marriage. Oh. Now, since you have to give the full faith and credit to the common law marriage, and considering I think Washington state might be a common law state, and I'll find out a little later. Yes. This giving the full faith and credit to the marriage, yeah. There's some big problems with not giving full faith and credit to an actual protection order, where the individual that I asked to marry me doesn't take the time to sign the fucking order right now. Now get me every state, coach, that has state laws that say that common law marriage can't.